Coming up next, after today's band dropped arguably the greatest rock album of all time at the tail end of 1971, the world braced for what would come next. I mean, expectations for the next record were through the roof. Everyone was assuming it would be a hard-hitting, heavy sequel to the album. But everyone would be wrong. This band's 1973 follow-up was a diverse and experimental collection of unconventional tracks, and the critics spit on it. And so did the fans. But this album boasts some of this legendary group's most iconic tracks, including today's featured song, which completely subverts your expectations, lulling you into a breathtaking acoustic ballad. Then it does an about-face and tricks you with a trapdoor ending. You'll see what I mean next. Get ready for a deep dive into a song that got the shaft from the naysayers and on the US charts, but it's now bigger than any of the songs that were ahead of it at the time. It's coming up on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you ever had a switchblade comb growing up, you're gonna love this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now, clicking the bell so that you always know when our new interviews and our song stories come out. We have a lot of great ones coming out. Also, check us out on Patreon for even more content. It's time for another edition of one of my favorite shows we do on here, number one in our hearts, the show that honors songs that were so unbelievably great they absolutely should have been number one on the Billboard Hot 100. But for whatever reason, be it lack of marketing, radio play, label support, or just sheer stupidity, the song came up short. Today's episode, we're featuring the incomparable Led Zeppelin, who rarely got the love on the US charts that they so richly deserved. With only one top 10 hit to their name, the epic foursome of Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, John Paul Jones, and John Bonham are definitely due more than that. And yeah, I know Zeppelin's strategy was all about the album, not the singles, but that's not enough to stop me from giving this legendary band number one in our hearts status time and again. So what song gets the honor of going number one today? From their fifth studio album, Houses of the Holy, it's Over the Hills and Far Away. So we've covered a lot of Zeppelin on this channel, of course, rightly so. After all, Led Zeppelin are the Lords of Rock. I think if we're just talking about Houses of the Holy, this is the fourth song that I've covered from that album. See, there's Rain Song, Jamaica, No Quarter, and Over the Hills and Far Away is the fourth. And one of the best songs in their legendary catalog. So since we've already hit up this album a few times, I'm not going to cover all the lead up here. In the past, we've talked about the expectations that fans and critics had for the band after the mega success of their fourth album, Zeppelin 4. And we've covered how some felt like Houses of the Holy was a letdown after Zeppelin 4. But not me. I love this LP. I love its diversity of genres, its bold experimentation, including its touches of folk and reggae and funk, and straight up rock and roll. For me, Houses of the Holy is right up there with the best that Zeppelin has to offer. The great Jimmy Page had this to say about the record, and I quote, "My main goal on Houses of the Holy was just to keep it rolling. Although everyone's clamoring for another Led Zeppelin 4, it's very dangerous to try and duplicate yourself. I won't name any names, but I'm sure you've heard bands that endlessly repeat themselves. After 4 or 5 albums, they just burn up. With us, you never knew what was coming. I think you can really hear the fun we had on Houses, and you can also hear the dedication and commitment." End of quote. And today's track, Over the Hills, is a perfect example of that mindset. Just within this song itself, there is an array of intricate and unexpected moments throughout. So Led Zeppelin had actually been tinkering with Over the Hills and Far Away live in concert throughout 1972, ahead of the March 1973 release of Houses of the Holy. But the origins of the song date back even before that. You have to rewind past 2 Zeppelin albums to get there, Untitled and 3. The creation of Over the Hills goes back to Robert Plant and Jimmy Page's 1970 retreat to Branyarar Cottage in Snowdonia, Wales. It was a primitive setting. No electricity, no running water, no telephone. This 18th century cottage was the perfect peaceful escape from the exhausting touring and recording schedule that Led Zeppelin had embarked on since its inception. Jonesy and Bonzo would both sit this chapter out, as the lead singer and guitar virtuoso were the only ones there. Well, they were joined by family, Jimmy's girlfriend, and some roadies. For the iconic duo, it was the first time that they had really sat down and written together. Said Page, "This was the first time I really came to know Robert. The songs took us into areas that changed the band. We took our guitars down there and played a few bits and pieces. This wonderful countryside panoramic views and having the guitars, it was just an automatic thing to be playing, and we started writing," end of quote. So even though the material they were writing at Branyarar was meant for Zeppelin's third album, of course, not everything made it. And Over the Hills and Far Away was among the leftovers. It's hard to believe that this one didn't make the album at the time with the quality of the song. Its title sounds like a fitting description of the scenic and mountainous Snowdonia countryside. When this song first took shape, it was simply called Next One. And then after that, it was called many, many times. The guys probably realized that the title was pretty close to another one of their songs, How Many More Times, so they made the title change to Over the Hills and Far Away. Zeppelin later recorded the song in 1972 using the Rolling Stones' mobile studio, which at the time was located at Mick Jagger's his English estate, Stargroves. For a short 4-minute track, there's so much happening musically with Over the Hills and Far Away. And this song progresses through several distinct sections, serves up a multiplicity of contrasts. For example, what begins as a Celtic-flavored ballad abruptly turns into hard and heavy about halfway through. Page kicks things off on an acoustic guitar, giving us an intro that is heavily influenced by an instrumental piece from his past. In fact, at one time, this song was an instrumental before it was transformed.
Hey lady, you got the love I need.
It's no coincidence that Over the Hills sounds remarkably similar to White Summer, a song from Page's previous band, the Yardbirds. The two are definitely connected. I mean, you can hear White Summer on the Byrds' 1967 album, Little Games. Actually, Led Zeppelin frequently performed White Summer as part of a medley with Black Mountainside while on tour from 1968 to 1970. If you want to hear this one, you can find it in a few different places, including the expanded reissue of Coda. However, the origins of Over the Hills and Far Away goes back even further than that, as White Summer in turn resembles an old Irish folk song called She Moved Through the Fair. That was then adapted for guitar in 1963 by Davy Graham. As Over the Hills and Far Away is driven along by Page's persistent acoustic guitar work, Robert Plant eases in for a relatively laid-back first verse. Together, Page and Plant set up for what appears to be a relaxing Sunday stroll through the countryside.
Maybe more than enough.
But then, just as you're setting in, the music shifts dramatically, with Jones and Bonham breaking into the mix and the band collectively kicking the song into overdrive. Later reflecting on the song, John Paul Jones called Over the Hills rhythm section exceptional, saying that there are a lot of very, very tight, exciting moments in it. Bravo, for sure. And then midway through the song, Jimmy Page's Les Paul launches into a wild, captivating solo, before a short ascending part from Page and Jones brings it all back on. By the time Over the Hills reaches its fade out around 4 minutes in, you feel like you've been through it all on this track. I mean, really. From moments of tranquility to pure adrenaline rush, Over the Hills and Far Away makes good on its promise to take you on an epic journey. The end of the track is rather strange as Plant's vocal fades out with the music. You're expecting the song to be over, but instead a lone guitar breaks the silence, playing a quiet variation of the folk intro riff. And you also get this wet reverb return signal, which creates this supernatural ethereal vibe. It's really haunting and oddly beautiful. So let's talk lyrics and meaning for just a minute. With a title like Over the Hills and Far Away, it's easy to think that maybe Robert is leading us back into the fantasy world of J.R.R. Tolkien's Middle-earth. After all, he's taken us there before in previous songs. Misty Mountaintop, Ramble On.
So I'm packing my bags for the Misty Mountain. But got him at the evil wall.
And in fact, Tolkien even wrote a poem about Middle-earth called Over the Old Hills and Far Away. This was way, way back before the First World War. But even with that perceived connection, this is no Lord of the Rings track. Actually, even though the two titles are similar, it is actually nothing more than a coincidence. Or is it? Check this out. Tolkien's poem would not be published until a decade after his death in 1983. It's a decade after the release of Houses of the Holy, more than that. So the poem and the songs aren't actually connected, but they kind of are, right? Sure, fans of Lord of the Rings might find some extremely vague references to Tolkien's tales here in the song, but it's a real stretch. With the song's title and lyrics about the open road being as close as the song comes to any Hobbit adventures. As we continue to break down this song, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear, the glasses I always wear in here. What are your eyewear needs? Are you looking for progressive lenses, transition lenses, migraine relief lenses, blue light protection, sunglasses, whatever they are, whatever they might be, man, Zenni's your choice. It's so cost effective, you can get 3 or 4 pair for what one would normally cost. Check it out today at our info button here to get up to 80% off regular retail prices. Note too that there is a traditional British song also called Over the Hills and Far Away. That one probably dates back to the 17th century. Several versions of it exist. The most famous of them shows up in John Gay's The Beggar's Opera. That was from 1728. Lyrically, Over the Hills and Far Away really isn't very complicated. When it all comes down to it, it's basically just a love song. Clearly illustrated by its opening line, "Hey lady, you got the love I need." But more specifically, Over the Hills is about love gone wrong. As the narrator reflects on past relationships, he remembers the love he wanted to give and he never received. Many times I love, many times been bitten, many times I've gazed along the open road.
Hey lady, you got the love I need.
But there's some hope mixed in there as well, as Plant also sings, "Many dreams come true and some have silver linings." And maybe in the end, that's all we're left with.
Many dreams come true and some have silver linings.
By the time Over the Hills and Far Away was released as a single, it was already featuring in Zeppelin's set list, going back to their 8th American tour in June of '72. Over the Hills was actually given an A-side status on the first single that was taken from Houses of the Holy. Dancing Days got the B-side.
You know it's all in my heart.
The single was released in the US on May 24th, 1973, and in several other countries ranging from New Zealand to Japan to Sweden and Canada. In the US, Over the Hills stopped short at a disappointing number 51 on the Billboard Hot 100. It's not Led Zeppelin's lowest ranking, but it's far from the likes of their more successful singles like Immigrant Song, which reached number 16, Black Dog got to number 15, and of course the granddaddy of them all, Whole Lotta Love, reached number 4. Incidentally, Over the Hills did do significantly better on the Cashbox chart, which makes sense because it was about sales. It went to number 28, but it's still a far cry from where it belongs. We'll get to that in a second. Chart rankings weren't any better for Over the Hills north of the border, where the single only reached number 63 in Canada. The good news is that, as I mentioned earlier, Led Zeppelin was not a singles band. So even with some disappointing chart showings, this track garnered steady airplay on rock radio. It's still played all the time on classic rock radio. Curiously, Houses of the Holy's other single, Jamaica, did markedly better. It reached number 20 on the Hot 100 and number 16 on the Cashbox chart. I guess you just never know. As for Houses of the Holy, that raced to the top of the Billboard 200, of course. Globally, it reached the top 5 in several countries, hitting number 4 in Italy and Norway, number 3 in Austria, the Netherlands, and Japan, number 2 in Finland, and number 1 in Canada, Australia, and of course, the United Kingdom. The success of the LP set the stage for a record-smashing American tour in the summer of '73. Most of those records were formerly held by the Beatles. On the first 2 days of the tour alone, more than 100,000 fans saw Zeppelin live. The group's concert at Madison Square Garden in July was filmed to use in the feature film The Song Remains the Same, which was released 3 years later. Over the Hills and Far Away continued to feature in Zeppelin's concerts until 1979. Archival footage of the song being performed live in Seattle in 1977 and at Nebworth in 1979 were later used for an official video of the song. This was then, in turn, used to promote the 1990 Led Zeppelin Remasters release. Jimmy Page also unveiled a new version of Over the Hills on his Outrider tour, minus Robert Plant, in 1988. The revamped song was met with mixed reactions, but you can't fault the man for trying to inject some new life into an old favorite, right? Page also performed it again with Robert Plant on the 1995 to 1996 World Tour. You know, Houses of the Holy has seen its share of controversy over the years for its cover. It was actually banned and taken down from Facebook on various occasions in 2019. We actually have to be careful showing it on here. This was after the social media giant received a petition with thousands of signatures, and that's when they lifted the ban. Interesting. Over the Hills and Far Away has continued to influence and inspire both the generations that grew up with it and those that have come after. This includes a number of bands who have paid homage to Led Zeppelin with their own cover versions. Better Than Ezra, Def Leppard, Stone Temple Pilots, and Foo Fighters, among others, have all taken a crack at the song. The week that Over the Hills and Far Away stalled at number 51 on the Billboard Hot 100, there was some strong competition at the top of the chart for sure. Looking at the top 3 alone, you had Shambhala by Three Dog Night at number 3, Yesterday Once More by the Carpenters at number 2, and Bad Bad Leroy Brown by Jim Croce at number 1. But then again, there was no one else like Led Zeppelin, and there never will be. So Bad Bad Leroy Brown got 2 weeks at number 1, and for the sake of setting history straight, I think we can give Zeppelin and Over the Hills and Far Away one of those number 1 spots, one of those weeks. We all know that Zeppelin deserves it. I mean, it was all about radio play, right? Zeppelin just didn't get played on AM radio. But people bought their records in the tens of millions. Oh, and over 50 years later, it has more streams across the major platforms, more than any of the songs in the top 5 that week. It's a song that lulls you in with its beauty, and then it kicks you in the teeth. God bless Zeppelin. Thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about Led Zeppelin and Over the Hills and Far Away. What are your memories of the song? Such a great one. What do you think about Houses of the Holy compared to the other Zeppelin records? What do you think about the top 5 that week? Man, so many great songs in the 70s. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe. We would love to have you. Until next time, I'm telling you, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.